Good morning, Bitcoiners. Let me make sure the whole stream is set up the way I like. Give y'all a couple seconds to get in here. Hope you're having a great day. Hype in the chat, indeed. We got McTimmy with a smile and a good morning. We got a Louie with a good day, Bitcoiners. And of course, we got a Bitcoin graffiti with a hype in the chat. No sound. Confirm no sound out there. Oh, truthfully, no sound. Yeah, that's what I thought, Bitcoin. That's what I thought. There you go. Signs and signs. Signs. It's all good. Good. Signs and signals. Excited to hear your thoughts on Kennedy. We've done a few on Kennedy. I think we were the first to call the whole Kennedy thing back in, I think it was October or November. So we're not missing a beat on the Kennedy thing. And I got some good stuff for today. That's for sure. And speaking of today, did you guys notice? We got a total sunrise. It's up. Bitcoin's running. We're good. All that's left for us to do is have a coffee and talk about what is new. Enmity says J6 was a hoax and that NFT guy has a broken brain. Yeah, we'll get into that. I was on Mario Nawfal's Spaces last night. Big room, huge. I wish I could have stayed to the end, but my last night in Barbados and I had a family obligation, so I only made it about an hour and a half, and it was a little chaotic. Anyway, we'll get into that. First up, you know what time it is. It's Moscow time. I got a great one today. This is from CBS News, right? They're worried about the seniors and what's going on with seniors, and they're worried about their health. So there's some good news for them, apparently, according to CBS News. Many seniors can now get another COVID-19 vaccine booster. Thanks, great. After the Centers for Disease Control and Prevention greenlighted a broad swath of changes on Wednesday that were first used to authorize by the Food and Drug Administration. So they're up to 7 boosters now. So that's great. 7. We're at 7. 7. Get your 7th shot, guys. Be careful. All right, so we have a little more fake news before we get straight into it, right? We have a little more fake news just because our man Robert Kennedy Jr. did announce his candidacy for president yesterday. So, of course, there's reaction, right? What do people have to say? Well, CNN, of course, goes back to the anti-vaccine activist. He's maybe if he was okay with 1, but 7, you become an anti-vaccine activist, right? Anti-vaccine activist Robert F. Kennedy Jr. launches his 2024 presidential bid. This is a great one. USA Today runs a story. Exclusive, Robert F. Kennedy Jr. launches unlikely presidential bid backed by 14% of Biden voters. And if you go into the actual article, well, first of all, Byron York puts his little comment on it, and he says, USA Today poll finds that RFK Jr. with 14% support among 2020 Biden voters in challenge to Biden. Findings underscore Biden's potential vulnerability to a more mainstream challenger for the Democrat nomination. So a little bit of a good spin. But the funny part of this USA Today article attached to the poll is that now it's supposed to be just an article talking about a poll. Right? That's usually how it works. You get a poll, and then they write an article, and then that's it, right? What's going on in the poll? So in this USA Today poll, they managed to find 2 times to characterize Robert Kennedy as a conspiracy pusher. So if you go into it, both times it's that he's been pushing unknown vaccines and his family doesn't support him, or some people in his family don't support him. So there you go. If you thought you were getting just the polls, you didn't get that, right? All right. So last night I was on Mario Nawfal's Spaces talking about AI. I was invited due to the Truth GPT announcement by Elon Musk a few days ago, as well as his lawsuit now. So he's suing Microsoft. What he's suing Microsoft about is the use of the data, the training models, in order to train AI, and it was never part of the agreement. And apparently, as I understand, because Brian Rommel, who I've been talking about a lot, was in the spaces as well, and Brian was saying, well, you make these commercial agreements to train on language or to get a bunch of data, really conversations between people, because that's what the large language models use to train themselves. And he was saying that the original deal that Twitter had for releasing its data to OpenAI was predicated on OpenAI's business model being what it was. And when that changed with the Microsoft, whatever happened with Microsoft, I can't, not a lot of people understand exactly what the ownership agreement is between Microsoft and OpenAI and exactly how it works. And I've seen different ways of articulating it, so I'm not going to bother here. It seems convoluted and complicated for now. I think we'll have a better idea later on. But the conversation last night, so, well, first of all, Brian Rommel said that the Twitter data is so rich, it's rare in its richness. You've got Quora, which he said is actually really good because the models actually need questions and answers as a testing baseline. Without that, it's a little more complicated, but nevertheless, the data in Twitter is just phenomenal. The amount of it is phenomenal. So it's one of the greatest tools out there to train these language models. So it looks like that's where Elon Musk's case is going to head. He was mentioning it on his Tucker Carlson interview 2 nights ago and 3 nights ago. He was on for 2 nights. RFK on last night. We're going to be talking about all 3 of those interviews. And so the conversation last night in the spaces ended up revolving a lot around truth and what's the definition of truth. And I gave my 2 cents at the sort of start of it. And I said, look, really, because everyone's trying to mind read Elon Musk in the spaces. What does he want? Is it world domination? What's he thinking? They were getting into like his ego and all. It was a little bit infantile in that sense. And what I said is, look, we can't mind read Elon Musk. Like, what are you doing? You don't know what his intentions are. You can hear what he says and you can hypothesize on what he's after. But really, what I hear coming straight out of his mouth without any need to mind read what his motivations are quite simple. He's saying if you train AI to lie to humans, and we've shown a predisposition to wanting to be lied to, right? We're showing this predisposition. If it decides and learns how to lie to us, we're in big, big trouble. And I was contrasting the fight that's really out there right now. And I made the argument that the lawfare that Elon Musk is engaging in is merely to stop down the corporate business model around training AI so that the more personalized AI can catch up. It's kind of a race, and he calls it a singularity in the sense that singularity in his definition in the Tucker and Elon Musk's definition in the Tucker Carlson interview is a point at which you can't predict afterwards. So what he's saying is this fight between whether or not AI is programmed by a corporate model in order to put its version of reality onto the users versus users training their own models to help augment their own cognitive functions is really the big fight. And whoever wins that fight that winner will help determine the future that vision will populate the future. So he calls it a singularity because depending on the 2 polarities that this question could go into, you're going to get 2 wildly different future possibilities. So what he's saying is, and even if you go back to that letter that he was a part of slowing down AI research, he's not been saying that it's cataclysmic as this thing like a Terminator or Skynet that's going to take over. It's not exactly that. What he's talking about is if the corporate business model gets so far ahead in its capacity to release AI that it's the only thing out there and the personal models can't compete, then you're in big trouble. Now, Brian said something really interesting as a great analogy, and it's kind of like what people said about Apple at the start when Apple was coming out with its first computer, that the larger computer companies at the time said, we run mainframes, right? We run all of this big hardware. Your little calculator chip is not going to be able to compete with us. In the end, of course, out of sync. Let me go. Let me make sure we are in sync because some of this stuff's going to be. And we should be back in sync. Let me know if that's back in sync. So it really just is about the corporate models that will end up advancing this technology. So when I see a pause, it's really just a pause so that the slower system can catch up before we arrive to some point of absolute bamboozlement from the corporate model, right? And why would we be worried about being in that position? Well, let's go back to RFK's entire candidacy, right? What is RFK actually talking about? RFK made the point yesterday in his Tucker Carlson interview, in his announcement in his run for president, that he's really against the wedding of corporate and political power in America, which is what we're seeing very evidently in front of us, right? We're seeing a very clear sign that corporate media, the game that people are playing in Ukraine and Russia to supply arms and to, let's say, supercharge that whole war machine. Whoa, whoa, whoa. That we're seeing heavy proof of the collusion, coordination between private interests, corporate interests, and political power. The very definition of fascism, of course. And when he was there in his announcement yesterday, the signs were actually really beautiful. I hadn't seen this said before, right? And I think this could be an amazing anchoring poll or something that really attracts people, and that's Kennedy Democrats, right? There's a lot about being a Democrat these days that's sort of cringe, let's call it, right? There's always been cringe parts of being a Republican. Um, yeah, back. Sorry about that. We had, yeah, everything's fine. Just had to say goodbye to the owner of the house. He's off for the day. He said he would come by. There you go. So pardon the quick delay. Let me get back to it. Just the local FBI at the door shutting this down. Yeah, there you go. Yeah, yeah. So, pardon me, back. So he was talking about this wedding RFK in the Tucker Carlson interview, and his announcement speech about what is more or less fascism. And when I saw the idea of a Kennedy Democrat, you finally now have a contrast between kinds of Democrats. We haven't had that in a long time. Republicans have had that for a long time, right? Republicans have had MAGA and GOP, and the infighting has always been a good thing for the Republican Party, of course. I've said for a long time, people who don't understand what Trump did to the Republicans by eviscerating and destroying the party, which he did, right? When he destroyed Jeb Bush on stage those years ago, when he was candidate Trump, and I think even the people who aren't fans of President Trump and who are worried about whatever else, in history, when you go back and you look at what candidate Trump was doing, the 10,000 words, unsolicited, unscripted a day, the kind of transparency that he offered and the humor that he offered was one of the biggest things to ever happen in politics. It really unshackled people's frame on how to think about politics. And, his insult to Jeb Bush that night, low energy Jeb Bush, is a masterstroke, just one of the greatest things you'll ever see. And so people don't understand. People like myself get it in the sense that we were inside of that conservative political community. I was working in Canada. I had already quit politics and gone into Bitcoin thinking it was a dead end, that nothing could come of it anymore, that it was never going to solve problems. It was completely in bed with the regulators and the banks out of the financial crisis. And so I had sort of given up, right? I thought things were going to be played the way they would, and we would have to do something totally different in order to make the world a better place, which is why I got into Bitcoin. And it sort of said, well, politics are just going to be a dead end and they're part of an old system. when Trump came around, it was so amazing because he was able to cleave the Republican Party in two. And by doing that, he put this contrast inside the Republican Party where the fighting for, in the end, the presidency just happened internally with Republicans. And of course, one side won. And you still see the ramifications today. The folks that lost are involved in the warmongering. They're the ones who keep supporting foreign interventions. And even when Trump was president, the old-fashioned GOP, the Lindsey Grahams and all these guys were, oh, let's go fight them and go bomb them and go get them. Remember, Trump is the only guy not to go to war, right? The only president not to go to war. So Kennedy, I think when I saw that Kennedy Democrat sign, it's a little bit like what MAGA did to the Republicans. You start to see a potential for Democrats themselves to have contrast and to move apart. Now, I don't know to what extent that's all going to go down. I don't know, but you can see it. So I don't know if it's going to happen, but you can see it. And he's the only person talking about this wedded collusion between corporate interests and private interests. So all of this brings me now to what I was talking about, what I was trying to say on the Spaces yesterday. But so the story of the Spaces is this: I went on, and then when I was explaining the contrast between corporate AI and the race for what Brian Rommel is doing, personal AI, and what I wrote my story, Satoshi Wedding Murders, on, and what I believe to be the case, we're going to have eyeballs, we're going to have individual AI, it's going to help us navigate the world. I even called it our third eye, and I said it'll protect you from hoaxes like Charlottesville and January 6th. So the guy was like, we saw video. You can't hoax a video, and you can't really... he didn't cut me off or anything, but I wasn't called on as quickly thereafter. I still got a lot of good out of it. Scott Adams ended up following me last night on Twitter, which is great. I'm a huge fan, of course. So he was in the audience listening and heard my explanation and started following me. So that's a plus, a positive thing for me personally. Here's what I wanted to get to, though, because the whole conversation ended up turning into versions of truth and what is truth and how do we define it and what's going on with that and reality and blah, 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 as if the reality of seeing a video is then, one for one to reality in the world. Like it can be just completely, converted into reality because there's a video of it. Of course, not true, right? The lens of a camera is one of the biggest liars in the world. We've talked about that a lot here. That's been known to film theorists and photography theorists for years, right? That the actual framing of the lens is one of the big hypnotic tricks in the world. And that's been known for a long time. So that whole expression, a photo is worth 1,000 words or whatever, or a video is worth, right? It's become completely insane, because we know how much they can be doctored. And in the era of deep fakes, right, we're all forced to confront what is more or less postmodernism and the difficulty of assigning much meaning to these images simply because of the frame, right? But here's an explanation that not a lot of people have ever heard or mentioned. And it's one I've paraphrased here. It's from David Deutsch. If you guys don't know who David Deutsch is, I'll jog your memory real quick. If you saw the Avengers movie, it's the point at which Captain America and Ant-Man arrive at Iron Man's cottage and say, we're going to do a time heist. And he kind of, Tony Stark, the Iron Man, kind of laughs at them. Oh, you solved the Deutsch something. I can't remember, equation or blah, 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 blah. What they're referring to is a man named David Deutsch. He invented this idea of the multiverse. And he is hard to describe exactly what he is. He wrote a book called The Fabric of Reality. He is a quantum cryptographer. I came into contact with him. I've told my story before when I first got into Bitcoin, coming in it as a lawyer who understood about economics. My blind spot was cryptography. So I went all in 2014, learning about cryptography, because I just didn't know anything of what was going on. I didn't know about the history of it. I had no clue about cryptography, really, right? I knew it was like locks on a computer, but that was about it, right? I understood the basic principles of coding a text and deciphering it, but I just didn't understand the science and the art behind it and the history behind it. So I learned a lot of that stuff at the time. And in doing so, I came across David Deutsch on my own, which was as a quantum cryptographer, which is another one of his incredible achievements in life. So he's probably got one of the highest IQs on planet Earth. right? He really is, and a gentle person, and not full of ego, and not showing off, and all that stuff. But he has, I think, the tightest definition of truth and reality, and it comes from his book on the fabric of reality. And here's what it is. The truth consists of hard to vary assertions about reality. And that is the most important fact about the physical world. So I'll say it again. The truth consists of hard to vary assertions about reality, right? So a bad explanation is very easy to vary, right? January 6th was an insurrection. Well, I have all these reasons, right? So more words, more language jumps in and confuses the issue. Even the concept of like the ocean is blue. You know, we've heard all these stories before about how the ancients didn't know the color blue. There was no word for the color blue. Did they perceive blue the same way? Even different languages, right? Even that we have different languages. Language, of course, is a human construct to help us understand and articulate the physical world around us, but it's not something that just exists in reality independent. In fact, every word we say brings us away from reality a little bit, because indeed the hard to vary assertions, just changing the language of a word changes reality, right? In a little slight way. It's still the same thing, but it's the Babel question, right? The Tower of Babel question. We all speak these different languages, and it becomes very, very difficult to agree on reality. You know, as a lawyer, I can read the exact same 100 word text, whatever 100 word text, sit there with another lawyer who's trained in language, right? We are language programmers. That's the coding that lawyers do. And we can look at the language and have a totally different opinion on what we read, right? There is no, and with every extra word you add, with every little bit of complexity you add, the more opportunity there is for entropy. I've described my summary of David Deutsch for us here before has been entropy resistance, right? That something that is entropy resistant is reality, and more entropy that is capable of entering into the system or the idea or the thought divorces it little by little from reality and truth and these other things, right? So what he goes on to say is that the search for hard to vary explanations is the origin of all progress. So when we actually finally do agree on something simple like E equals MC squared, right, a very tight definition, it becomes reality, because the ability to argue against it, the ability, and then of course we get into quantum physics, and then we do see reality start to peel away a little bit, and those rules don't apply. The rules of the very, very small in the physical world don't apply to the rules of, are not the same rules as the very, very big, right? We've seen that for a while. That's the whole tension between what Einstein figured out and what the cripple, whatever the cripple guy's name is, Hawking's, right? Stephen Hawking's, you know, he did the really small stuff, right? That was what his big genius was, right? The really, really small stuff. So this idea that the truth is really just hard to vary assertions about reality, and the tighter you make them, the more capable you are of arriving at something like truth or reality, and the less surface area of attack that you have to argue the thing, the more likely it is going to be real. So all of that to say, when you start thinking of what these large language models are, right? When you start thinking about what they are, you start to understand that the prompting becomes super important, right? How it frames it. And the idea that it gets rid of programming languages through prompting, that prompting now reverts back to the English language. So that in a sense, we're starting to come together and simplify things, because what we don't want is that everyone has to go out and relearn these stupid other languages, computer languages, and further distancing ourselves from reality, right? That's the whole story of Babel, right? Humans came together too much with a common language, and it looked like we were ascending to understand God very intimately and closely, and so destroyed, and we have multiple languages, we speak backwards with each other, we can't all communicate, the source of all confusion about reality starts to set in. And indeed, it goes back as far as languages. Now, when the computers come around, we invent entirely new languages to further distance ourselves from understanding what the hell's going on, right? It took me years to figure out how computers work, and even though I grew up with them, right, you could just use them and not ask. And then it took me years to figure that out. But now that we're reverting it back to language, now that engineering of computers and programming might through large language models turn everything back into one language, one coherent thing, we're going to learn something, I think, about ourselves, as we learn about AI and how we prompt it, right? How the prompts work. Because what we think of as thoughts, what we think of as intelligence, might be, in our case, the same as the AI, in the sense that it's words that you put together and it sounds smart. Your brain convinces you it's logical and reasonable and sounds like a real thing. But here's the thing. Once we understand the power of prompting, once we understand the power of prompt engineering, I think we're going to discover that we have been prompt engineered to the same extent that we are doing it to the AI. You know what I mean? Now, Trump, for example, is one of the greatest prompt engineers for human action ever, ever. Right? That's his talent. It's all persuasion in the end, right? It's all getting people to do the thing you want them to do. But I think we're going to find out that as humans, we are not so different from the AI in that one sense, in that it's very easy to persuade people. It's very easy to push people to believe they came up with an idea on their own. And I don't think there's any way to fight against it. It's not that if you learn more language and you're smarter that you become immune to it. Some of the smartest people have been destroyed on Twitter because of Trump and everything that's going on, right? By resisting Trump's prompt engineering, because there is prompt engineering on the other side of the equation as well. Everyone's doing it to people, right? Everyone is doing it to each other. Now, what I think we can gain from this, is if we do have our own AI, it can indeed protect us, right? But for now, just having the conversation about corporate collusion behind this prompting, because what that turns it into is the same old game. It becomes the same game. It becomes the corporate model that is already prompt engineering us through the use of words and language to do it at a whole nother level that would be insurmountable. I made the point yesterday on the show that the victors write the history books. You know what you're seeing in American history books already? That's why I brought it up yesterday. You're seeing American history books taught in American high schools that validate Charlottesville as if it happened, that validate January 6th as if it was a coup and an insurrection. Those are being taught today, right? So history books indeed are written by the victors. And if history books can be written by AI at a clip at which we can't even imagine, right? They can write this stuff much faster than human beings. Then you have a situation where you're going to get buried in history books and you won't be able to fight out, and it's forever. I think, right? The kind of control that can happen with this type of prompt engineering amplified only for the corporate model and not for individuals. If the AI is taught that, according to some people, it can lie to others and manipulate them to that extent, we're in big trouble. Right? Big trouble. And I think that's what Musk is getting at when he's talking about the corporate model. But it fits exactly with what RFK is saying about his whole campaign. Right? He's saying that this is pervasive in all of American society, in the healthcare, in money. He was going on yesterday about inflation and, again, how we've been manipulated by words. The expectations are not at all what reality is. He was describing the type of socialism that is being created for elites versus the brutal capitalism, he called it, for poor people. He was basically describing the Cantillon effect and the distancing of rich and poor to the extent that we now have it. So all of this to say, the conversation is collapsing into probably the easiest contrast and the most familiar contrast to Bitcoiners, which is corporate collusion and centralization of power, and in this case, prompt engineering of humans, versus a decentralized model of humans themselves leveraging AI power to prompt engineer humans using the power of AI to just guide their own life, using prompt engineers, but only on the machine, right? Not humans using the machines on other humans, humans themselves just using the machine for their own happiness and pursuit of happiness and all those things that we do indeed think are American culture beyond the money and all the other stupid things that we talk about. So here's the kinds of things, if that's the way things are framed for Kennedy, look at the field he gets to operate in, right? Just look at what happened yesterday. So we get Bernie Sanders, right? Bernie Sanders, who comes out and says the USA and NATO cannot sit back and allow Putin's aggression to go unresponded to. But his bigger concern is to prevent Putin. Sorry, no, I got it wrong. So he says we cannot sit around to do this. And this is on the BBC. They start pushing him, and he says, "My biggest concern is that Putin is preventing us from coming together to combat pandemics and climate change." I mean, that's what that's where he's gone back to. The vaccines and 15-minute cities are the reason why we got to get rid of Putin, right? So again, RFK, his son went out and fought with the volunteer battalion in Ukraine. And he's even now completely changing his idea for his own son, saying, look, this is not something we should be involved in, right? This is crazy stuff. So from there, here's another amazing one. And you can see exactly what he can now leverage for his campaign and exactly how he's going to get this contrast, the same type of contrast that Trump got in the MAGA versus GOP. You can start to see RFK get it for Democrats. Here's the Wall Street Journal talking about the IRS. And remember a prediction we made last week, right? That internally in America, the division and the contrast and people, moving to each side of the line in the sand is happening internally. And we said that these whistleblower leaks that we got from the Pentagon and that guy who got arrested, Teixeira, and the media putting the stuff out, right? All of that. I predicted last week that you're going to see way more leaker stuff, right? That now it's seeping into the government and people's disgust with the collusion between corporate interests in the Biden administration and the criminals that are involved in it, that it would seep out into other departments. So the IRS today has a whistleblower. Right, the IRS had a whistleblower yesterday, and the Wall Street Journal covered it. It's around, of course, our favorite, Hunter Biden. And it says, an IRS supervisor has told lawmakers he has information to share that suggests the Justice Department is improperly handling its investigation into Hunter Biden and is seeking whistleblower protections. They go on. Now, remember the contrast here, right? So again, we're getting into the world of contrast. RFK Jr. has already shown he's interested in Twitter as a big part of his platform. You're not going to see any other Democrat do that, right? They can't compete. They can't survive out there. They'll get eaten up at this point. They don't have the New York Times running cover with a blue check for them anymore. They don't have NPR running fake news stories. They don't have PBS running fake news stories. The idiotic CBC is gone. BBC is also labeled propaganda. So, and the community notes part, which we've talked about a lot, is also a really powerful weapon. I still don't think people appreciate just how powerful the weapon is. But look at the contrast, right? So IRS whistleblower says that Biden tax evasion is getting covered up. Meanwhile, when Matt Taibbi, never forget, when Matt Taibbi was testifying in Congress about Twitter files, about Fauci, about the vaccine, about censorship on the part of the government of medical information that was relevant to the public, right? And the Hunter Biden story and all the other things he was talking about. Do you know who showed up at his home? It was the IRS, right? We talked about it here before, but I want to reiterate, look at the contrast. Now, you can tell me it was an accident that the IRS showed up at Taibbi's house the day he testified in Congress. Maybe, but that looks like bullying to me. That looks exactly the way it looks, really bad. Now do the contrast, right? You get a gentle touch on Hunter Biden and this bullying of Matt Taibbi. There's only one Democrat candidate that's capable of talking about that. And it's a hot button, light your brain on fire kind of issue, right? So the contrast, the field through which RFK can administer devastating blows is great. And now what I saw yesterday as well in his announcement, and I like to see this, it was the body language part, right? Now, the thing that, and it's a weird irony, the thing that Nixon hated the most about the Kennedys was their privileged body language, sort of the way they were so casually confident, right? He hated that. It drove him nuts because he was the opposite, right? He was naturally awkward. So a lot of people have picked up on that Kennedy quality of being comfortable in front of crowds, comfortable making speeches. Their whole life has been in this sort of public eye and doing this sort of stuff. So they have a natural ease in front of a camera that is hard to manufacture. You know, JFK Jr. had it in spades. This guy, what a shame, his airplane crashed, right? What a shame, because you've never seen someone that charismatic and who was probably going to beat Hillary Clinton in the Senate election in 2020 for the New York Senate seat. And of course, we all know the confidence and body language and swagger of the uncle JFK and the father RFK Jr., RFK Sr. So, seeing him on stage, I saw the natural ability that he has to throw darts and hit a target. So very pleased about that. Very pleased that his voice doesn't seem too much trouble, and that his capacity as just being comfortable on stage and not being shy and not being afraid of the moment or whatever it is there, right? He looks capable. And when you think about what he can do now, attacking whistleblowers, career IRS criminal supervisory special agent that overseeing this investigation is now going to be a whistleblower. How many people in the Democrat primaries can talk about it as openly as he can? I guess if Tulsi announces, she could as well, right? So I'm not denying that that's the case. But this guy here is going to be a real nuisance and a real menace to them. And they're not going to be able to shut up the things he says unless they do the thing they did to the dad and the uncle, right? Then it's all bets are off, right? Then all bets are off. But nevertheless, we're now living in a world where the hard to vary assertions, right, truth and reality, is not going to be controlled nearly as much, even within the Democrat bubble, right? You've got someone inside of the Democrat bubble now who's going to expose ideas and truths and facts and all those other things that are going to destabilize the conversation over there. It can't be scripted. So it's exceptionally good news that this is happening, right? Now bring it back to Bitcoin, right? The idea here that the truth consists of hard to vary assertions about reality, and that the search for hard to vary explanations is the origin of all progress, right? You need look no further than the hard to vary assertions of what happened when on Bitcoin's blockchain to know that it is a backbone to reality. You can't simplify things any more than down to a couple of integers and some math. And luckily, Satoshi did this. Now, what I heard RFK Jr. doing yesterday, talking about money and inflation and all the trouble it's causing, leads me to believe he is a likely candidate to embrace Bitcoin before the election. And again, which should adhere to my prediction that Bitcoin is the number one question in the 2024 presidential election. It will rise to be the number one question by then, simply because the old lines of blue and red are going to fall apart, because the Kennedy Democrats are going to be woken up. They're going to awake. It's a real cohort out there, a real group of people that can latch on to this idea the same way that MAGA became so popular amongst right-wing people. Now, I'm not necessarily predicting he's going to win the Democrat thing. I still see the potential for him to flip Republican and join a ticket that's cross-party. I'm not the first one who said that. Roger Stone has been saying that. Other people have been saying that. I would like to see that. I think that's the most entertaining outcome. That's Elon's razor, the most entertaining outcome. But we'll see. We'll see how it all goes. And I think that the conversation that he's bringing about centralization, about the collusion of corporate and political interests versus the contrasting alternative, which is decentralization, which is more or less what his campaign is about. I would say RFK's campaign is about decentralization. That's it. That's the point of the campaign. And if liberal people who are well-intentioned and well-meaning and have just been prompt engineered into believing what they believe, are now engineered by something else, new conversations, that new prompts enter their brain, I think you're going to have a real change. So that's my thoughts last night on the Mario Nawfal thing and the RFK announcement. So let me see some of these. A lot of things here. Let me see. Oh, we're going back. We've got a lot of comments today. RFK should stay in his lane. Uh, I came across a speech at you where I went to college and RFK Jim knocked nuclear energy as destructive for the environment. Your thoughts? Yeah. Um, Look, he's not. We don't want heroes, right? And that could have been old nuclear energy stuff. I think he might have read the comic book version of nuclear energy things, but we haven't had much conversation about innovation in nuclear energy in a long time in America. So I think he'll come around on that. But good to bring it up, right? We don't want flip flop people. That's for sure. Um, I guess one needs to filter because there's too much info. Yeah, yeah. RFK should stay in his lane. Yeah. Science means cutting. Understanding is discerning. Seeing it all at once is confusing. Indeed, indeed. One fuses together, and understanding is lost. Yeah. For interesting read, which includes Babylon's topic. Thanks. Hello, my name is Unseen Realm. Yeah, I mean, I think that the idea that we can now engineer machines with pure English language is one of the big innovations here, or with human readable and speakable language. I think you're going to find out a person is not located in our brain. Yeah, maybe. Yeah, that could be. We're about to, I think, that's why we were talking about even about evolution the other day, right? I'm not saying I know the answer. I'm just saying that the stories that we were so sure of will become preposterous, as they seem to always do when you have these big changes. I have the same feeling that we're self-reflective. Yeah, yeah. In the Satoshi Wedding Murders, my AI is extreme, like childlike. They have crisis of confidence. They need support from humans, right? It's kind of not the way people expected. Where do I sats? You made it. Thanks, my man. RFK may not be president, but maybe this time around we will actually talk. That's what I'm talking about. Yeah, yeah, yeah. Exactly, P Man Van. That's what I mean. He's going to be able. And that's even what I mean about Trump going from candidate Trump, or candidate Trump to Republican nominee Trump. It was a different person. The minute he started going to run against the Republican, to run against Hillary, you started seeing him read teleprompters. He started doing canned speeches. He changed. He tried to pivot. It's called the pivot, right? You win your nomination and then you pivot. And right away, I could tell it wasn't the same show, right? The stand, like when he was candidate Trump, and it was crazy. I couldn't miss one. I would be home working on something Bitcoin related, and then your thing would go on YouTube, Trump making a speech, and I'd be like, what's this? The minute he was running for president, the energy was gone for that stuff, right? It just wasn't the same show anymore. So because he didn't know what he was going to say, right? It was going to be so crazy. I think Bobby Jr. has the chance to be that guy. That's what I meant even about the body language. I see enough confidence there that he's not afraid about being embarrassed. He's already been through that. They've already laughed at him. His voice was already taken away from. You know what having your voice taken away from you can actually do psychologically? How much you would never want to self-censor again after that. And that's what he talked about in his announcement, that he's been self-censoring for years, and he's done self-censoring. And the time, by the way, that he said he's been self-censoring for is interesting. If you do the math, it's from the moment Obama took over the party. All right? Interesting. Very interesting. Yeah, Vivek and Bobby will drive the conversation. That's refreshing indeed. Indeed. Yeah, indeed. 2x speed. Good morning, Boo Boo. No problem. It's going to be, it's already been a long enough one, but today is my last day here. Internet as its core decentralized. We're just that change, I think. Yeah, it is, and that's why we're going to win. We're going to win. It's not like we're starting from scratch. It might seem like the forces against us are so powerful, but it's Joe Biden. Like, I don't want to underestimate the corruption and the people with him, but we're dealing with some small-time criminals as well, right? I mean, for real. So big media companies are proper. I think so. That's sort of the conclusion I've come to. Yeah, that what is known about language and thinking and the delay between what you think is your thought and what manifests outside. This whole concept of intelligence just being your ability, take myself, for example, right? I had heavy math training as a teenager, and then heavy language training as a teenager, and heavy language training again later as a law student. Now, that ends up looking like intelligence because you can manipulate language very, very well. And you sort of have a little bit more CPU, let's say, because the math that you did makes enough connections in your brain at a young age that you can transpose that capacity into other things like language. Now, it doesn't mean that's intelligence. It just means you have a good use of language, right? Maybe it scores a little higher in IQ, but that's not really what's going on here. And so, if we understand that intelligence is this ability to just think in words and just put words together, and then it's a thought and maybe real, right? That's how we end up making things in reality, right? They become they are words and thoughts, and then we put them out, and then we can manifest them. That's what we're here to do. But a lot of stuff can just look like it's okay because the words are in an order that makes sense to human. It doesn't mean that it's anything more than that. So I think we're going to understand more about how much we're prompted, how few of our thoughts are actually from us, even though we think they all are. Right? They're not. Right? They're not. Like even when you see what Trump has done to conversations, you're seeing his capacity to prompt engineer a group of people. And myself included, I'm not. Trump is another one of those people. You can't just be in a room alone with him and keep your own ideas. It's not going to work. Right? And like, you could be sure you could be the biggest Trump hater, and if you were forced in a room with him for an hour, you're going to love him at the end. That's just the way it is, right? And I would say I'm no fan of Bill Clinton. I'd say it's the same thing the other way. If I was alone in a room for an hour with Bill Clinton, I might think I was totally hypnotized an hour after I got out of the room, but you're dealing with people who have incredible powers of persuasion from their language, from their ability to prompt engineer other brains. And this secret might have been known by some for a long time, or this technique, let's call it, not secret, right? This technique might have been discovered by many people over time. AI can gaslight us. We are deaf in trouble. Imagine a moron asking. Well, that's the thing about the AI too, Mr. Bitcoin, is that it's not going to be smarter than us. It can write things faster, but it's still it's still limited by the lowest common denominator, us. Right? We're not that smart. So the gaslighting is sort of easy. Decentralized information, instead of central informational control, that still needs to die off. The world, it's not. We're getting there, though, guys. Mr. Bitcoin, that totally didn't happen in 2020. Yeah, exactly. Exactly. Twitter is totally winning the battle. Yeah, we like that. Will the whistleblower? Yeah, probably, bud. It's probably. They hunted the last one down, right? But again, my prediction stands. You're going to see more and more and more and more. It's not going to stop. More people are going to come out of the woodwork. Not everyone in government, by the way, is evil, right? That's just a reality. Some people went in for the good reasons and maybe are stupid that they didn't know they were possible, but they're not evil. There are evil ones there, though. Don't deny the evilness that exists, right? I always say Biden crime family. Yeah, F them. I've had enough. No need to be polite. Yeah, Tulsi is great. We love Tulsi, man. Yeah, I think I said it, Mr. Bitcoin, even after I was talking. Tulsi is going to not shut up about this stuff, and it's going to be useful. Love has 18 years of censorship and the next 18 months of chaos. Yeah, he said that. He did. He said 18 years of censorship and the next 18 months of chaos. And what I also liked is that he was talking about himself as president, not just a defeatist in subconscious language about the next 18 months and beyond. He always was quick to say he's not talking about just from now until election day. So that was also very good. Financial actions now, same tools used on individuals as written in the sovereign individual. Exactly. Yeah. Well, look, I mean, I've said that many times. I was declared a terrorist in Canada last year, and that was all the proof that the sovereign individual explicitly predicts that is going to happen. At the same tools at the time he said used on Osama bin Laden would be used on normal individuals, and it didn't take 20 something years for that to be the case. And in 2022, In stupid Canada, I'm a terrorist. Like, give me a break, you know? Dumbest thing you've ever. I still can't believe it happened, right? You know, when people say, because I'm now a devout separatist and can't like seditious separatist 100%. And when people will say to me, you know, oh, you know, da, 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 Canada, it's a good idea. No, it's not. I have no desire to see that place continue at all. Don't care. Don't care. I love the people. I hope every place does well. I hope, and I think they all will. I think Quebec is going to be better off alone. I think the prairie provinces are going to be great as new United States. I think British Columbia will be fine on its own. I think Ontario will be fine on its own. But we don't need to be together. Like, it's dumb, you know? And I'm not saying I'm even going to get a better deal. The Quebecers would call me a terrorist quicker, you know? But we at least don't have to keep up the sham. Oh, I missed one of these. AI that is not sentient will never understand unsolvable games. This is the only idea I think which such a thing many people have not patience for. Yeah, they're the CAPTCHA ones. Yeah, how to confound AI, like the opposite of the CAPTCHAs were supposed to prove human users. Well, they still have trouble with the CAPTCHAs. They do. They hired, you know, the AI that tried to hire someone on Upwork or something. There's a thing called Stuxnet, a virus reportedly developed by the US MICC, which has infected logic controllers all over the nations. Yeah, there's bad stuff out there, no doubt about it. RFK mentioned Bitcoin, right? Not. I didn't watch the whole speech. I don't think so. He talked about the Fed's problem, and he talked about the exit ramps being closed as proof of intention. But there you go. Physical power injected into cyberspace. That is the prompt injections. Yeah. Yeah. Bitcoin is so awesome that it's hard to believe it is real even after knowing it is. It seems like one of the biggest challenges facing widespread. Yeah, I think you're referring to what I said about this search for hard to vary explanations is the origin of all progress. Well, there is no greater find in the search for hard to vary explanations than Bitcoin of what happened when. Just that's it. What happened when, right? That's it. That's all you need, though. That's all you need. That's the backbone. That's the backbone. You know, in my story, Satoshi Wedding Murders, what I imagine the future to be is not that Bitcoin is scaled. We've cognitively scaled Bitcoin, and we can use it almost as a rhinestone. There are very rare occasions in my future world where there's on-chain transactions. We mostly just need this unit of account that helps us know what happened when, and we trade that for time, and that's the economy. That's all of it. That's everything, right? Which is now a much simpler version, because what we don't want is the confusopoly we live in, right? The idea that truth consists of hard to vary assertions about reality, everything on Wall Street, if that's the definition, it's all fake. It is all fake, because everything they wrote 5 years ago is garbage now. Everything they wrote 10 years ago was garbage 5 years ago. Everything they wrote 20 years ago was garbage 10 years ago. Nothing lasts that long there at all. New products, new innovations, new engineering, blah, blah, blah. The whole thing is just a topsy-turvy situation that is useless in the end. It was good for a while, but if we're talking about entropy resistance as reality, then the US dollar is the fakest thing going, because it's just entropy. That's all it is now. It's just entropy. We don't even know how many euro dollars there are. We don't know any of it, right? That's just a fact. We don't know how much money there is. They could say M1 and M2. Give me a break. When money is debt, I can create money with you people right now, right? I owe you $5. We've created money because the money is debt. I just have to say I owe you money, and we've created debt. This was known to Austrians in the 1950s, that you can create euro dollars like that, right? And euro dollars are not euros. If you guys don't know what a euro dollar is, all euro dollars are the US dollars that are not in America, which are always created by non-Americans because they owe money in US dollars. That's it. That's all you need to know about it. And that's why we don't know how much there is. You could make infinite amounts. We have no idea. None. He is a natural Bitcoiner. He's going to embrace, guys, predicting it right here. Predicting it right here. Oh, yeah, that's true. I forgot about 420, everyone. For those who partake, enjoy. I will probably partake today. 420 is a fun time, right? But also, he will light up the biggest rocket ever today is apparently launch day. So don't forget, 420 is also launch day, and I believe it's also some other legal case he has. So 420 is a big day in Elon's life. Donald Hoffman seems to have proved consciousness is non-local in his interview on impact theory. Highly recommend. I will, Brian. Thank you. If you wouldn't mind just tweeting that, putting that name in a sub thread, because I'll be a little busy after this, and I'll try to get to it later. Vivek and RFK coming to my trying Kepenta, trying both of them. Vivek, I had agreed. I spoke with Vivek last October before he announced or anything, when he was going on and on about CBDCs. And I said, you'd be great. And he agreed then, but he hadn't announced his run for president. And he's still saying, I'm trying. Typical of a lot of these people running in politics. We got a lot of them on the line. But RFK, indeed, I did a Spaces with Max Kaiser and Stacy a couple weeks ago, and they gave me his phone number because they had interviewed him before and are friends with, a connection or whatever. So we've got a note to him, and we're hoping he says yes. We'll add him last minute, which we're prepared for. Humans are nodes of the greater organism. We swap out info. Internet is facilitating this consciousness of the greater. Yeah, I mean, so even go back to the story of Babel, right? I think in the end, Scott Adams has this book, which he's just given away, by the way. He's given this book away on locals called God's Debris. And the story more or less is that Babel happened, right? And we are anatomically atomized, but we are one human. And that's what it meant by getting too close to God, by coming too close together and being one. That becomes that's a God-like thing, right? That might be God, all of us collectively together. And even if you get into the when you start seeing the anyway, I don't have that articulated properly, but basically when you get into the universe at the fractal level, being inside of us as well, and more or less what Jesus said, right? That it's inside of us. So the truth is, so the story that Scott Adams wrote, God's Debris, is about that. We smashed apart, and over time we rebuild, and that's the game we're playing. That is the simulation, right? That we are playing a game of coming back together. And that's what makes it so hard, and that's what inclines us. That's the subconscious flow that motivates us. And so he wrote a sort of a science fiction-y book about that, and it's really good. I recommend it to anyone. By next election, Mexico, US, and Canada's political stage changed drastically. Oh, yeah. Like I said, Canada don't make it, Nope, not going to make it. If you think it's bad with 2 years or whatever you're on of Biden, we got much bigger problems in Canada. Hyperconnectization is what we're experiencing. Some nodes resist dying. It's a cellular rebirth of the human race. Yeah, I think so. Well, decentralized in order to recombine into a soul thing. Way in the future, with many cycles to go before that, but that's the thrust, according to God's Debris. The Bitcoin blockchain ledger for data. When they started talking about blockchains on that space yesterday, out. Jesus, what are you talking about? Does not confound people lying about the data. A biased AI can rely on falsified data. That's what decentralized was supposed to be about. Proof data. Yeah, garbage in, garbage out for sure. Said he would not run again if he didn't lower an array of diseases in his first term. I like that. And I like the anti-vax stuff, right? The presumptions that we have forms how we rationalize everything. The idea that the popular vote creates a majority consensus government is one such false Yeah, I mean, we don't get our freedom from democracy. We've been talking about that a lot here. That's one of the myths, right? Freedom is a practice. Oh, I have the definition of woke too. If anyone, there were people arguing about that for a while. This just reminded me of it, right? Woke is a performance. That's it. That's the definition. It's not a thought. It's not a series of thoughts. It's a performance. If you perform, you're woke. So perform, right? And that's where the prompt engineering comes in. That's how the performance is incited. Right. So if anyone, that debate that was going on 2 weeks ago, people defining what's performance. It's a performance. Just watched Kennedy's speech. Pretty awesome to hear that. But just how far will it get in the States? Look, again, why I think Kennedy Democrat is such a powerful rallying signal akin to MAGA. Um, people have identified as Kennedy Democrats without even articulating it for years and years and years. So, good thing. Great show. Praying for safe. Thank you, Brian. I appreciate it. Yeah, indeed. We are done here, folks. I went longer than I thought. Safe travels. Thank you, guys. Thanks, everyone. Peace. Smash the like button, CK says. Indeed. Thanks, everyone. Thanks for the well wishes. And tomorrow, show is iffy. I have a train at like 9. That Spaces it got ridiculous. I had to get out. I had other better things to do with my family and friends and neighbors and all that. I was there to get connected to Brian Rommel, who was on it, and I thought I got a bit of a connection with him. But I win because Scott Adams followed me through the experience, so I didn't need anything more than that. That was great. I'll let you know on Twitter what's going on tomorrow. It might be a little early, by the way. I might just sign in like 15 minutes early and do something a little cash. But I would like to see you all in the morning. I would feel lonesome without it. All right. Peace. One more question. Take care of your family and stream from Vermont. Oh yeah, I will wear, but I'm not going to be back in Vermont for a little while. I got a little more. I got a little more running around before I get back to Vermont. I've got to go to Toronto, and then I got to go to Texas, and then I'm going to come back to Toronto and then go to the farm. So I'm not going to be at the farm for another week and a bit. So there is going to be a few programming hiccups in the next little while. I'll let you know each of them because there's lots of planes and trains involved. All right, everyone.